What do you say about someone who gives your life meaning? What do you say about someone who's always there with support and understanding? Someone who makes sacrifices so that your life will be easier and more successful. But what you say is that you love that person and treasure her. I simply can't imagine the last 8 years without Nancy. The presidency wouldn't have been the joy it's been for me without her there beside me. And that second floor living quarters in the White House would have seemed a big and lonely spot without her waiting for me every day at the end of the day. You know, she once said that a president has all kinds of advisors and experts who look after his interest when it comes to foreign policy or the economy or whatever, but no one who looks after his needs as a human being. Well, Nancy has done that for me through recuperations and crises. Every president should be so lucky.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and welcome to this month's Live From at the Reagan Library. Remember, we do these on the first Wednesday of every month. Now, if you are watching us live, you know today is March 4th, 2026. And in just 2 days, we will be commemorating the 10th anniversary of the passing of Nancy Davis Reagan. So as such, we are going to spend today's Live From reflecting on the week surrounding her passing, as well as listening to some excerpts from a handful of the eulogies that were given at her funeral. But one of the things I do want to point out before we get too far into this is that here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, we do choose to celebrate her life more than mourn her death. Now, if you watch these, you may recall that when searching for a location for their presidential library, Ronald Reagan fell in love with the vistas here at our Simi Valley campus. He immediately chose the west side of our campus for their memorial site, their grave site. That location is home to beautiful Southern California sunsets, horse trails, and an endless sky. Now again, as you may know, on June 5th, 2004, at the age of 93, Ronald Reagan passed away. And just a few days later, on June 11th, he was buried here at the Reagan Library. Flash forward to March 6th of 2016, and Mrs. Reagan passed away. A few days later, on March 9th and March 10th, she lay on repose here at the Reagan Library. And then just a day after that, on March 11th, 2016, she was buried here next to her husband. Now here in our archives, we have a lot of the different items that were gifted to us or given to us during that week of the funeral. So we're going to be spending today's Live From sort of going back and forth between the artifacts here in our archives as well as those excerpts from the eulogies I talked to you about. Now, as always, if you are watching live on Facebook or YouTube, and we just added X, so if you're watching live on Facebook, YouTube, or X, go to that chat box, not the comment box, but the chat box. Simply put in your name and where you're watching from so I can say hello or ask a question. I'm going to be going to the screens probably 5 or 6 times throughout this entire Live From. So don't be shy, you know it's my favorite part. And in fact, I'm going to be going to the screens in about 30 to 40 seconds. So now is your warning to go and say hello to me. But we're going to start this and kick this off by actually doing one of the eulogies. We're going to go to an excerpt from the eulogy of former Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney.
In the spring of 1987, President Reagan and I were driven into a large hangar at the Ottawa airport to await the arrival of Mrs. Reagan and my wife Mila prior to departure ceremonies for their return to Washington following their highly successful state visit to Canada. President Reagan and I were alone, except for the security details. When their car drove in a moment later, out stepped Nancy and Mila, looking like $1 million. And as they headed towards us, President Reagan beamed. He threw his arm around my shoulder, and he said with a grin, "You know, Brian, for 2 Irishmen, we sure married up."
I think that clip is so much fun, just really at the Irish roots and the joking that they would do. He gave a wonderful eulogy, and that was, of course, just a piece of it. So we're going to go to the screens now again. So this is your turn to go to those chat boxes. I see that John Dean wrote in, my favorite president and first lady, a level of class and respect for the country that hasn't been seen since. That's beautiful, John. Thank you. David Cooper, Ronald Reagan was the best president that we ever had. We agree. Janet Thompson, one of my favorite. Ewan Kumia, I miss the Reagan family. Steve Button, he was great. He was one of the best. Thank you all so much for writing in. Robert Standard, I loved Reagan as an actor. I had doubts about him as a president, but after he was sworn in, I knew he was the POTUS. Tristan, love you, Nancy. You were the best first lady of the modern era. She was amazing. Michelle Dixon, a gem of a lady. Thank you all so much for writing in. Imnan Khan, I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I see that you wrote in as well. Thank you so much. Thomas Miller, enjoying this. Maybe it's cut off. I can't see exactly what you said. Oh, here it comes. The Reagans were very, the joy of technology. You're saying something, I'm sorry, I can't see it. Maybe it'll come up in a little bit. The Reagans were very something. I still can't see it, Andreas. I'm so sorry. Well, how about Thomas? We will come back to you on the next time we come around. So we're going to go back and talk to you more about this live from, talk to you about some artifacts and hear some more eulogies. We'll go back to the screens. Thomas, I'm going to start with you. I'll be able to read it then. And a reminder for those of you watching on X, this is new for all of you, so you can simply chat live with us. And we go to those screens every about minute or so don't be shy. So let's get back to the week surrounding the funeral. Of course, the nation and the world mourned Mrs. Reagan, a first lady whose strength and grace and love for her husband really endured her into our minds and hearts and into American history. Now, you may or may not know this, but it's custom or tradition for first ladies and presidents to attend the funerals of former first ladies and presidents. And Mrs. Reagan, her funeral was no exception. Former President and Mrs. George W. Bush both attended. Former First Ladies Rosalind Carter and Hillary Clinton attended. And then the sitting First Lady, Michelle Obama, attended as well. Now, in our archives, we have the guest book from the entire funeral, but the pages you should be seeing now are the pages signed by by President Bush and the First Ladies. Our archives also has the mourning card that was given out to people who came to pay their respects on March 9th and March 10th when she lay here in repose. We also have the printed program that was given out to anyone who attended her funeral on March 11th. We even have the credential that media had to wear the entire time for that whole week they were on our campus. Now, the other item we have that's sort of part of this collection that you should be seeing now is a printed booklet. It was written, produced, and published by the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. It was published about a month after her passing. It includes her life story, her love story with Ronald Reagan. It also includes the causes most near and dear to her heart, the foster grandparents program, and Just Say No to Drugs. And then the back section of the tribute book included the tributes that poured in from the heads of state, both domestically and internationally. So we are going to go to our next eulogy excerpt. So this is your warning. As soon as the eulogy excerpt is done, we're going to go back to those screens. So go say hi to me and I will say hi back. But we are going to listen to James Baker. James Baker was President Reagan's chief of staff and then his secretary of the Treasury. But he was more than that. He was a friend of Ronald Reagan and he was a cherished friend of Mrs. Reagan. So let's hear an excerpt from that eulogy.
Nancy, who might have preferred a more private life, became the consummate political wife and First Lady. He owed much of the success of his presidency to her. Ronald and Nancy Reagan were defined by their love for each other. They were as close to being one person as it is possible for any two people to be. When the president made his slow exit from the stage, she dedicated herself to his memory and to his place in history. Now she too has exited the stage to join her beloved Ronnie in eternity. I can just imagine how St. Peter might let the president know that she had arrived. A beautiful lady is at the gate asking for you, he said, with a jar of jelly beans. a shopping bag full of letters, and a suitcase filled with hand-knitted socks. We love you, Nancy. We miss you, but we will see you on the other side.
Wasn't that beautiful? His eulogy for Mrs. Reagan's funeral, he spoke here following one of Ronald Reagan's, one of his birthdays, and they're one of my favorite marks as well. Such a good order. Let's go back to the screens. Thomas, I can see it now. Thank you for your patience. Basically saying that, and it just went away again, saying that the Reagans were special. So thank you so much. David, before I retired, you worked at the Dixon, Illinois Telegraph newspaper. That is really cool. You've been through his birthplace. He had a positive outlook. He sure did. Sarat, hello from Los Angeles. Hello, thank you for tuning in. John, you met Ronald Reagan at high school in California when you were a little boy. That is really cool. That's all I'm saying. I can't see the rest of it. Oh, he was governor. That's really cool that you were able to see that and you were get to meet him, or not meet him, but hear him speak. So that's really great. Tristan, hi from Canada. Hello. Hi from the United States. Thanks for joining in, Tristan. Hal Bloom, we were privileged to attend her funeral. Thanks for that. Those are my parents. Mrs. Reagan was buried on my birthday, hence that message. I'm so glad you guys are watching from Arizona. Thank you so much. We are going to go back to those screens in just a few minutes, so please keep going to that chat box, ask more. We'll go back in about another minute or so. So let's talk about more about what we have in our archives. So as you can imagine, that week when news came that she passed away, and the Reagan Library was flooded with flowers sent in from everyone you can imagine, and all the little note cards, condolence cards that came on those flowers were kept and are in our archives. And we pulled a couple that we thought you might like to see. Ronald and Nancy Reagan were really good friends with Frank Sinatra and the Sinatra family. So we pulled the condolence note from the Sinatra family. It reads, "Rest in peace, dear friend, with love from Tina, Nancy Sr., and Nancy Jr." Now, Ronald Reagan, maybe from his Hollywood days, I'm actually not quite sure, was also really good friends with Chuck Norris and his wife Gina. We found their card in our archives, and it reads, "God is always near to those who have a broken heart. In this time of loss, we lift you up in prayer." We also have note cards from the Ford family, from the Nixon family, and even Nancy Pelosi. But speaking of families, we wanted to also share excerpts from family members. Of course, Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan had two children, Patti and Ron. So the first excerpt we're going to listen to is Patti's. Again, right after Patti's excerpt from the eulogy, we were going to go back to the screen, so please keep going in there and saying hello. But now let's hear from Patti.
In the months before my father died, my mother repeated often that she had to be there at his last moment. Her determination was ferocious. She simply had to be at his side when he left this world. I said the only thing I could think of and what I thought my father would say, that it was in God's hands. She was there, and occasionally I've thought that even God might not have the guts to argue with Nancy Reagan. As her own health declined, she was quite adamant and vocal about reuniting with my father on the other side after her passing. I am hoping for God's peace of mind that she got her wish.
So I know I told you we'd go back to the screens, but no one knew I said hello. I'm offended. So please go to that chat box, say hi. All you have to do is tell me your name and where you're watching from so I can say hello to you. We will go back again in about another minute, so please do that now. Back to our archives. So we didn't just get condolence cards and flowers and little notes. We got letters from people around the world. And I pulled this letter because I found it, very sort of summed up a lot of the different types of letters that we received. This is just from a gentleman who was a young child when Mrs. Reagan was First Lady. And if you are of a certain age, you will remember the TV show Different Strokes. And Mrs. Reagan went on that television show to promote the Just Say No to Drugs campaign. This gentleman, as a child, saw that, and it left such an impact in his life that in his letter he talks about how he grew up in an area where drugs were sort of rampant. And because of Mrs. Reagan's Just Say No campaign, he stayed clean his entire life. And he credits it to Mrs. Reagan and her Just Say No campaign. Truly remarkable. And then we also have, you should be seeing right now, this sign. If you've ever been to the Reagan Library, we're on Presidential Drive, but you turn in at a corner on the cross street is Madera and Presidential Drive. And many people left items at that crossroads of Madera and Presidential. And what you're seeing is one of the signs. This was left by a group of students who had just recently toured the Reagan Library, and they came back and left this handcrafted sign in remembrance of Mrs. Reagan. So we're going to now do another eulogy. I'm going to try to go back to the screens again, so this is your warning. But we listened to Patti, so now why don't we listen to an excerpt from their son, Ron?
But I hope you realize that none of this would have been possible without Nancy Reagan. I don't mean that she was active in fundraising and building the library. Of course she was. What I really mean to say is that there would be no Ronald Reagan Presidential Library without a President Ronald Reagan, and there likely wouldn't have been a President Ronald Reagan without a Nancy Reagan. I see the faces of many friends here today, people who've known and loved my mother for years. But most of my mother's buddies are gone now. She's among the last of her cohort, the old gang, her generation, and now she is truly with them. If my mother had one great talent, I think it was that she knew how to love, and she loved one man more than the world. In her later years, after my father had gone, she used to ask me whether I thought she would be with him again when she died. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but I always assured her that wherever Dad had gone, she was surely going to go there too. We should all be so lucky as to end up where we've always wanted to be. And today my mother comes to rest on this lovely hilltop with its far-reaching views next to her beloved Ronald Reagan Library.
I mean, what Ron said was so accurate. Mrs. Reagan was instrumental, obviously, in supporting her husband, but also in us building the Reagan Library and the renovation in 2011. So the Reagan Library really wouldn't be here without Mrs. Reagan. Thank you. A handful of you did add things into the chat box. I'm going to say hello to all of you. Brian was a Carter baby, but Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan were the first family they remember. Same, Brian. Eric, hello from Sylmar. Hello. Jimmy from Chicago, Illinois. That's really cool. Thank you for staying up and watching this with us. Tristan, I love this family that made the world better even after they left office. I was born in 2000. You studied them in elementary school. That's incredible. Don't know where you live. Oh, you were the one from Canada. I hope you one day come to the Reagan Library and learn more about them in person. Sadat, love the Sarat, love the excerpts. Great getting to know the people speaking. Yeah, and again, these are just excerpts. The full eulogies can be found on our YouTube channel. There's also eulogies from Diane Sawyer and one other that I am blanking on, and I apologize for the person Tom Brokaw, and they're great as well. So you can also see 2 additional eulogies if you watch the funeral on our YouTube channel. Clint, another Canadian. Hello from Ontario, Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I do go back one more time, so if you haven't said hello yet and you want to, I guess I should say, or else I'd be a bad mom, hello to Savannah and happy birthday to Alexis. Okay, let's go back to what we have in our archives. So we talked about just a moment ago the letters that poured in. Well, we also, of course, got letters from heads of state and a lot of first families. And I thought I would read a handful to you, so excuse me as my head is down. But President George W. Bush wrote, Mrs. Reagan was fiercely loyal to her beloved husband, and that devotion was matched only by her devotion to our country. Former First Lady Barbara Bush wrote, Nancy Reagan was totally devoted to President Reagan, and we take comfort that they will be reunited once more. First Lady Michelle Obama wrote, Mrs. Reagan was a woman of incredible strength and grace, and she was a passionate advocate for so many important issues. Mrs. Reagan reminded us of the importance of women's leadership at every level of society. And then the last one I'll read came from President Jimmy Carter, and he wrote, a woman of strength and wit, Nancy Reagan's dedication to our country was matched only by that of her husband. Theirs was one of our nation's great love stories and a model of shared devotion to our country. America is stronger and better for their service. So we do have one final artifact that I am going to share with you, and then I will go to the screens for one final time. So if you haven't said hello yet and you want to, now is your last warning. But the last item in our archives I wanted to share with you is this American flag. This flag was flown on the USS Ronald Reagan at half-mast on the day of her funeral, and then they mailed it to us. So I think that's a really beautiful sort of tribute from the USS Ronald Reagan, the ship named after Ronald Reagan. So let's go to the screens one last time, and then we will wrap this up. So let's see if anyone else has said hello. Yeah, 2 of you from Canada. That's so cool. William, great First Lady, we agree. And Katrina says hello as well. So thank you for all of that. I do appreciate always you guys chiming in on the chat and saying hello. One of the things I like to do, as you may know if you watch these, is tie in to the theme of our live from something that is carried in our store. So we just wanted, we've only have one item we want to talk to you about. It's a book actually published by the Reagan Foundation. It's called Nancy Reagan, A First Lady Style, carried in our store, reaganlibrary.com/store. It's a beautiful coffee table book. I'm not sure what you're seeing on your screen right now. Within that red box, it's quite heavy. Trying to get it out. Maybe you're just seeing it on the screen in a picture. Maybe that's the way it's going to have to go. But it's 304 photos, her life in both as a First Lady, as well as her fashion, her jewelry. There's sketches of some of her dresses by the designers, how those outfits were put together. It's stunning, and some of them, including the one here I have in my hands, is actually signed by Mrs. Reagan. So again, reaganlibrary.com/store. So as I start to conclude, I do want to remind you all that if you do visit us here in Simi Valley, they are buried here on our outside campus. There's no cost to come on our outdoor grounds and tour the grounds. So you can come up Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. to pay your respects to President and Mrs. Reagan. Admission is only charged if you actually decide to come inside the library and tour the museum. I happen to be standing in the gallery dedicated to Mrs. Reagan, which has items from her childhood, including her christening gown. It even has her passport. It has dresses she wore while in the White House. And just some other great love story pieces in here as well. So you can see all of that if you come here and visit. So thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate you finding us, and we will see you next month. Thanks for watching.
of the United States. Ready? Ready?